Good morning, everybody, or good morning, good afternoon, good evening, especially for my co-host today. It's getting a little bit late in Germany. This is Scott Dillon, host of the SAP Cloud Platform Garage Series, and I'm here today live from San Ramon. So I'm here doing some enablement for some of the new pre-sales graduates that we have coming on board, basically my replacements. And we're trying to get them trained up. And this is our first garage session for 2020. And so with me today, I'm honored to have David Kunz from SAP from Waldorf. So David, introduce yourself. What do you do? How long you been at SAP? What's your favorite food? All that stuff.
Yeah, hi. I'm David, and I work for SAP for about 4 years and a few months. And I'm in the Node.js runtime team of the Cloud Application Programming Model.
Awesome, that is awesome. And David, and you fiddle in your spare time, right, with a bit of physics? I'm told.
Yeah. So originally, I'm a physicist. I have a PhD in theoretical particle physics. Yeah, but currently I'm fiddling currently more around with programming.
Awesome. And so it's really a pleasure to have you. You've been, I've learned so much in the last 3 weeks preparing for this session. It has been unreal. So thank you for joining today. So the idea is, for those of you that have not been to a session before, we do one topic per month. And we're going to introduce the scenario in a second. But if you want to see the sessions for this year or register for them, you just go to this link, bit.ly SAP Garage 2020, and it'll bring up the new registration page with the new sessions. And then as people know, we typically do a little poll just to kind of see if this is your first time in, your second time in. So you can just answer that poll, and then we'll just take like 20 seconds to wait for you to do that because we have about a 20-second buffer. And we're going to jump in and talk about the scenario, which has been quite awesome actually to work on. So that's about 15, 20 seconds. I'm just buying some time. Oh, I see some folks on there from Pratt. Hello, everybody from Pratt. I see some folks on there from Canada Life, Bank of Canada. Welcome, Bank of Canada. I see some folks from my team. Hey, Lucas, Tyson Foods, welcome. Yeah, we got a lot of different people on the phone today, so welcome, everybody. Okay, so we got the results are, so we got first time in the garage, 85%. This is amazing. A lot of new people coming on board, which is awesome to see. So let me just go through the scenario. So last year, we did a lot of garage sessions. We got about 20 now. They're available on YouTube. And one of the things we want to change just a little bit this year was make it more relevant to a business process. So the sessions will still be contained. You can still watch an individual session, but the goal of this, the next 10 sessions essentially, maybe even 11, will be to build out an end-to-end incident management solution. And so you see an incident, loose cable, frayed wire, burnt light bulb, whatever, you take a picture of it, you record some basic details, and you would submit that. And so, of course, you can imagine there could be many ways to do this. I'm trying to show it from a CAP perspective. And so for those of you that were not on the last session in November, first go watch it. But we're going to recap that shortly, and we're going to start from scratch, because one of the things that I hear from people all the time, they say, we love the sessions, but they said, Scott, continue with this focus that we can watch the session and repeat back what you do. So David helped me post today's work on GitHub. So if there's something that's missing, you can go to GitHub and get the entire project, which is great. But so today, specifically, we're going to have this CAP project. We're going to build it from scratch, but we're going to copy a few files over because we showed how to do that in the November session. So we're not going to repeat that, but we will be building an entire CAP project from start to finish, hopefully in the next 45 minutes, and we'll see how that goes. And then we're also going to just introduce this UI5 application using a Fiori 3 template. It's not a complicated app, but I think it's pretty nice looking. And then here's the crux of the day. So this enterprise message bus is used to publish messages/events. So really the idea today is to take this arrow and figure out how complicated it would be for someone that's building an application using CAP to then enable some things with David's help, because he is the guy behind the messaging piece of CAP, right, David? Is that accurate?
Yeah, you can say that, yeah. But it's mostly a team effort always.
Oh yeah, of course. But you're the guy that's on that. Your focused really is on that messaging stuff, which is amazing, and you're surrounded by an amazing team, that's for sure. But the idea would be, how hard would it be if every time we publish a message, we could see that and publish that to the message bus? So then down below, over the course of the next 8 sessions, as we basically attach different things to this message bus, how complicated would that be? And what does that give us in terms of flexibility and being able to loosely couple these applications on the bottom from the initial creation of the incident? So that's kind of what we're talking about. So let's try something. If you like, people that want to participate, you can bring this URL up in a browser. And I'm going to share my screen now so you see what I see. But it's basically bit.ly/incident with an uppercase I, CF at the end, which is Cloud Foundry. So let me just start a screen share so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to show you 2 things. Number 1, I'm going to have this window up. And you can try it on your phone. You can try it on your desktop. The only thing I ask of people on the phone, if you're going to try it, which is bit.ly/incident, uppercase Y/CF. Please put only appropriate pictures in the incidents, because I don't have any filters on that. There's no nobody checking the MDM scenario. And if 3 or 4 or 5 people submit a message, we should see it immediately being published to the message bus on this top right-hand screen, because this is basically a Node.js application listening to it. Now, if I don't see any events being populated in here, I'm going to go ahead and create one myself, but I'm going to wait maybe 30 seconds with the hope that somebody on the phone would do that. 30 seconds is a long time when you're live. Come on, people. It's bit.ly/incident, uppercase I, uppercase CF at the end. So if I were creating an incident here, problem with mic, issue with mic, and I'm going to say this is a hardware issue. Priority is going to be low. I'll take a picture. Oh, David's right there and handy. Perfect. And I'll save it. Oh, I have an error. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the format of the picture that I took. Maybe it's the extension. Let's just try something else. All crazy. Take a picture of me. Scan. Let's see if that works any better. Oh, I got an error here. I'm not sure why that is. Best laid plans. Try that one more time. Oh, it says no data now. Okay, we have an issue here, which is maybe why there's nothing coming in. Okay, so we got to get started then on the actual building of this app. But first, I'll stop that. Unfortunately, I don't have time to debug it because we are live. So I'm going to go back to the screen, David. And what I want you to do now is take us through the introduction. Oh, sorry. One last poll, people. Sorry about that. Have you ever used or considered using enterprise messaging? Just a quick poll. We'll wait 15 seconds and then we'll move on. 2, 1, moving on. And then hopefully we should get some input coming up on this results screen. What we will do is we'll move over to the kind of the presentation part, which David can kind of introduce us to enterprise messaging, because I didn't get a lot of details on that. So tell us, David, about messaging and consuming and emitting events, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. So when you build a microservice application, I think one of the most important things is to be able to communicate with other microservices. And there are basically 2 ways to communicate via synchronous APIs and via asynchronous APIs. And both are very important and both are needed. And in this session, we're going to tell you how to consume events or how to emit events, which is an asynchronous API. So that basically means that the senders, they publish messages and they don't even need to know any receivers. So they just fire and forget. And so they are not slowed down because they don't have to wait for any response. And for those receivers, they can subscribe to messages and then they can react to them, right? So they don't have to poll every 10 seconds for anything to happen. They can just react to incoming messages, which is a great way to deal with changes in external systems. And yeah, the next slide, please. So to be a little bit more concrete, messaging always consists of publishers and subscribers. So publishers can be any system, basically. It can be an SAP system, for example, SAP S/4HANA, or it can be a non-SAP system, and obviously it could be CAP applications. And subscribers, the same. It can be CAP applications or really any other cloud-native extension project. And so the publisher produces some messages, and they will land in this orange box here, which is the SAP Cloud Platform Enterprise Messaging. This is a service provided by the SAP Cloud Platform, and it's basically a message broker. So each message has a topic attached to it. Topic is basically a string, and every consumer can subscribe to those topics. And when they do that, a queue will be created, and this queue will subscribe to those topics. And if an event will then it will be safely stored in the queue. But the message is not lost. And then the message will be transferred to the consuming application, and the consuming application will be notified of this change. Yeah, that's basically messaging in a nutshell.
Okay, that's great. So if I'm just recapping it, did you get that little pun, recapping it? So if I'm to recap it, one of the things that I've come to appreciate, and I'm learning more and more about it, is this idea of loosely coupled, right? So when we're building this idea of a loosely coupled application, then we can publish a message, and the message, it doesn't have a preordained endpoint, right? So you publish it to the message bus, it sits out there, and then these other applications that subscribe to it, which is the idea, they can come on and come off the bus and be pulling things and not pulling things. And as you described, you've got these two major buckets where you subscribe to a topic, which is like a point in time. So if messages are flowing through the bus, and if I'm there and I'm listening, and I'm listening by topic, I can grab it. But if I'm not listening, I don't get it. So the analogy that I've used with some customers is that of a radio, right? So the radio is always playing, and the message bus is always on. And if I'm in my car and I tune into my favorite country music, sorry. If I tune into my favorite country music channel and I dial it in, I'm going to listen to it. But if I turn it off, it's gone, which is very different than maybe me recording or taking a copy of that song and listening to it later, which is the whole idea of a queue, right? So I set up a queue, messages go in, and then when the app starts, it's pulling messages from that queue. So I'm guaranteed to get those messages.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very nice analogy. And the best thing about this is the sender doesn't even have to know you, right? So the radio station doesn't have to know that you exist. And it just sends those messages and you receive it automatically.
Right. Okay, so this is really good. Okay, so that's, I just wanted to say one more thing. So then in terms of CAP, so then your job has been to make it really easy, can I say, make it really easy for people like me who are not like big time coders, but make it easy for people to then event enable an application that you would build or deliver with CAP. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty much accurate. So we want to make the life of application developers as easy as possible. So we don't want you to spend hours and hours and hours to set everything up. We just want you to start working on your domain.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's, I'm going to share my screen. So just while you were talking, I know that I made a little mistake this morning when I redeployed one of the apps, and I didn't give it enough memory. So if people want to try it again, you certainly could. I'm sharing my screen, and you can see that on the screen here, it's the messages are being received by the enterprise message bus, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So the link that some people in the chat were asking about is like this. If you want to type it in, bit.ly/incident CF uppercase C uppercase F. So incident CF uppercase I uppercase CF if you want to try it, and that should bring you to this UI5 application. However, without further ado, let's do some real software development here. And, by real, it's kind of lightweight for me. It's not what David does all day long because I'm a novice and he's an expert, which is why he's here to help me. But we need to start by creating a project. So for those of you that were not on, and I got myself some notes here, for those people that were not on the last Garage series back in November, we did a more detailed session on this. So this was going to be a really quick overview. But the starting point is, David helped me with the last couple of days. So I'm going to type CDS init garage add HANA, MTA. So when we do that, it's going to create this empty project. Correct, David?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
It's not completely empty because it also generated some files you really have to use. For example, the package JSON and stuff like that.
Right, which we're going to get to in a minute because I've been learning this is very, very important. So what we're going to do, but for the folks on the phone, what you will also see is in the GitHub repository that we can publish a link when we send out an email later. All the files are already in there, so you won't have to worry because some people said, oh, sometimes you copy things from place to place. I'm like, it's true. And in order to save time, which is what we're about to do now. So if you watch me here, I'm going to take this package JSON file, and we're going to explain exactly what that is. I'm going to take this one. Oops, sorry, I'm fiddling with my fingers here. I take this one, and this one. Don't worry, we're going to explain all of that. Going to pop into this directory. We're going to paste it. And yep, we're going to do that. And then one of the first things we're going to do, I'm just going to open up this package JSON, and we're going to change the name because that's the other project that I have. We're going to call it Garage. So now we have, in the world of Node.js, David, this package.json file is probably one of the most important files that we have out there. So let's just quickly tell people, if you wouldn't mind, what is it for, essentially?
Yeah, so in Node.js, one of the tools is quite important, and that's the Node Package Manager, or short NPM. And NPM makes heavily use of this package.json file. And this file contains a lot of meta information about your project. For example, the name, the version, the description, the GitHub repository, and so on. But there are also some information which are super important to actually install the project or build the project. And for example, you can tell NPM which dependencies to other NPM packages you have. In this case, we rely on SAP CDS, as well as on some other packages. And when you type in npm install in this directory, it will automatically install all those packages listed. Right. So it's very easy to share your code to other developers. They can just write npm install and the project is installed, which is quite handy.
Right. So I'm going to do that now while we're explaining a few other things. So basically, exactly as you just said, I think I have two options. Correct me if I'm wrong here, David. But number one, what I heard you say was, in a roundabout way, Node.js, very modular. So you can take modules that are built by other people, other vendors, other partners, grab those and use them. Number two, if you're working on a team and you have these modules, you can make them a dependency in the package JSON. And if you put and this is really important, at least for me it was, when you put that dependency there in that section for that module, it's going to automatically go and install it when you do it here. So that's interesting, number one, but the vice versa is also true. If I install a Node module from the command line to npm install, messaging module, whatever, it's going to update the package JSON file for you as well. Is that also accurate?
Yeah, that's also accurate. That wasn't the case a few years ago. Then you explicitly have to write save, I think. But nowadays, yeah. Nowadays, if you install something locally here, it will be added to as a dependency in your package JSON.
Awesome. Okay, so that's good. So then what I did just while people were waiting, you have this npm install. You do it within the context of the directory that was created by the CDS init, and it then goes ahead and it basically installs that app. So now what we showed on the last Garage session, as soon as you do that, so hold on, that's not entirely true.
So my light went off. I have to move a little. I'm too quiet here.
It's all good. So I'm going to take this directory. So what I'm going to do now, because of course with CAP, you need to tell it, right, what structures you're going to be creating. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to drop these files, and then we'll show people what they are in a minute. But I'm going to drop that one, and I'm going to drop the other one. So basically, there's a serve folder here, and there's a database folder. And by copying these files over, what we're doing is we're telling the CAP model what structures should be created, which is really straightforward. So as an example, this is the one that you will see in the GitHub repository. If I look at it, you can see it's a service file, and it says, look, I'm looking for this incident service, and it's got some entities defined in it, and that's all explained in the other session. But the point of the matter is we need to have two structures, one in the DB folder, one in the service folder, in order to make the application run. So now, if I'm back over here, I think we should be good to go now. Hold on. I'm here, and I type, go back to my, type this in, CDS run. What it's going to do, and this is also another really nice thing about, oops, hold on. Can't have two little web servers running at the same time, so we'll shut down this listener. Little on the fly.
You could, but on a different port.
Right, gotcha. Okay. Maybe we can fix that up after. So now I have this little application that's been rendered locally on my laptop using SQLite, which is a really nice feature that we can take advantage of. So if I go here now, and now it's rendered this application, and you can see it's empty. So the service, the safety incident structure is empty because I didn't put any data in there, but you will see, as an example, the categories are populated, the ones that you saw in the app and things like that. So the photos is empty, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's as easy as it gets. So we basically went out, we took the structure from the previous session, because what we're trying to do, remember, is we're trying to build out this incident management application. So this is going to be the heart where the services are generated and the data gets stored. So this is good. So now we're going to move on. I'm going to put my up here. And so now I'm going to open up VS Code. Because at the moment, what's happening, I'm in this garage, and so these were the files that I brought in here. Whoops, I brought in this schema folder or schema file, which you see here, so people can see safety incidents and whatnot. But what I want to show you now is we haven't enabled this. So this is at the point now where we're going to start to enable enterprise messaging and see how complicated or not this will be. So inside this folder, David pointed me to a little plugin where I can basically fire this message. Also show me this little shortcut, which is the control tilde symbol. And what we can do here is back here, hold on, I'm going to try to get both these windows up at the same time. We will see if I do a send request here. So I do the send on the left-hand side. I send in a new incident, basically. And yep, it's telling me I got all kinds of errors here today, but luckily I've had them before. So I put in the wrong spelling for the priority code, so I'm going to send it again. And basically it tells me, yep, you've got an incident created, and you can see that we're posting a message or a record that's being received by the services generated by CAP, taking it and putting it into the database. But that's where the buck stops. So it goes into the database, no event generated, et cetera, et cetera. So now we want to event enable that. So David, this is where we get into a couple of things. So one, I'd like for you to explain to the awesome people on the phone what, I'm in the wrong directory, obviously. I got to go up to the package here, this one. So in this file, we have this section down here, CDS requires, and we've got a database, SQLite. We've got this production thing going on, which I want you to explain. And we also have this messaging section where we have this repeated twice, which might be a little bit confusing to people. So I want you to talk about, first of all, what is this thing in the square brackets?
Yeah, so this is what we call a profile. And it works kind of like this. You can set environmental variables in your shell, right? And one environmental variable is really important in the context of Node.js applications. This is called node_env. And usually when you deploy your application, you always send this environmental variable to production. And this profile thingy here in this JSON basically does the following. If the environmental variable node_env is set to production, it will take the content of this section and override the section above. So in this case,
right.
the kind SQLite is overwritten by the kind HANA. That has also a reason, because SQLite is only intended for development, but not for production. And that's why we want to use HANA for production.
Gotcha. And so just to show the people, I'm going to do this in a few minutes after we kind of get through this first section, show people with SQLite locally, but this is the syntax that we'd use. And as soon as you execute this command in this shell, it says, oh, I'm going to use the parameter of HANA, and that triggers a build for HANA as opposed to a build for SQLite. So what about this next one? We've got messaging, which is all about you, and we've got this parameter called kind, and it looks like we've got two types here, enterprise messaging and file-based messaging. So before you answer that, you've said to me several times, and I've read it in some of the documentation, and I've seen it in some of the PowerPoints, whenever the folks speak about CAP, they talk about grow as you go. Can you explain this concept?
Yeah, sure. Grow as you go means basically we want you to start fast. We don't want you to set up a connection to HANA first before you can even start developing. We want you to be able to quickly write your business logic, and then later at some stage set up all that stuff, all those nitty-gritty details. And grow as you go means start fast and later on build more and more capabilities into it. And that's, by the way, the reason why we introduced SQLite as an option to have a database for local development, because then you don't need to care at all about the connection to HANA, and you can just start.
That's awesome. So then tell me about these two types of messaging. We've got file-based messaging and you've got enterprise messaging. And so for those people that don't know or have never seen it, on top of SAP Cloud Platform, there is a messaging service, which I will just show you quickly here. So when you go into your SAP Cloud Platform cockpit, you can set up enterprise messaging. Sorry, I got a little timeout there. You can set up enterprise messaging, which then starts a service, which you can then start to publish messages to. So you can see here, in my particular case, I've set it up. I've got two queues, safety incidents 2. You'll notice one of them is empty because I had that consumer running. It was pulling messages off and basically emptying the bucket or the queue. And I've got this other one that says I've got 28 in there. But in general, that's the idea, a number of messages, in total 28. And then you have these queue subscriptions, which says, for this queue, I want to subscribe to this topic. So as soon as it sees something, floating along on the message bus, it grabs it, takes a copy, puts it into the queue. And then the question is, how do we get it on, get it off? So if we just go back here for a second. So in this particular case, you're sitting down, you want to start development like we're going to do right now. And we said, well, you know what? We haven't set up the enterprise messaging. Immediately, for someone like myself who's not an expert programmer, I think, well, okay, so that clearly means I need to write a bunch of different code for local development versus enterprise development. And David said, no, that's not the way it works, right? So we're going to show you now how to do that. So I need to copy over one file, and then we're going to explain what that is. Let me just see here. Yeah, okay, hold on. Yep. So I'm going to grab. There's a file in this directory called service. Copy that, and then we're going to explain what it is before we go any further. So I paste that in, and I come back here, and I open it up, and I have this guy. So one of the questions that, one of the powerful constructs, at least what's coming across to me as I learn more and more about it, about CAP, is that within, 15 or 20 minutes, and I know that I copied some stuff over, that's very true, but once you have your model created and you deploy your project, you very quickly get the basic CRUD methods, create, read, update, and delete. However, the first question then that people normally ask is, well, I don't want to be locked into the SAP methods and code. How would I change that? So David, we just copied in a file here, this incident service.js. What's the naming convention all about? Why is it important? And how do we then let customers inject, you've been coaching me on the terminology, these custom hooks or custom handlers where they can put their own logic in there. Can you talk to us about that just for a minute?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, if you don't add any custom logic at all, you already get a full-fledged OData service, right? Full CRUD functionality with filter, expand, search, and whatnot. But at some point, you want to add custom logic. So you need a way to plug that into our framework. And one way is to create a file which has the same name as the CDS file of your service. So on the left, you can see this incident service.cds. And if we take that name and just end the file with JS, then our framework will automatically hook that into the process of those requests.
Okay, so the important thing there is that those two names have to be the same.
Yeah, exactly.
The name, okay, perfect. And then let's talk about what this thing is here, service.before, after, on. Well, what's going on here?
Yeah, so even before that, what you do is you export a function, right? In line 1, you write module.exports, and you export a function. And this function is run, and it will be run with the service as an argument. So you have a kind of a handler for that service, and you can do stuff with that service. In this case, we register handlers. So in line 3, you can see there is this service.before, create safety incidents. So this is a way to register some coding which shall run before a safety incident will be created, right? So when there's a create request coming in for safety incidents, this code will be run before all generic code.
Right, so here's the safety incidents entity, right? That's what we're talking about?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So before this is created, we basically say, let's do some stuff here with this code before that entity is created. So this gives us a way that we can plug our custom stuff in either before or I'm assuming after, based on what you will tell us in a minute.
To be a little bit more precise, it's not the safety incidents entity of the DB schema, but the safety incidents entity of the incident service.cds, because that's the actual service entity you expose. Yeah, this
here.
one.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, in the end, it's just a
entity.
projection. Yeah.
Okay, cool. No, that's important. That's important for people to know, no question. And okay, so back here. So we had this before, and then what's going on here?
Yeah. So what you provide as the third argument is a function which takes the so-called request parameter. The request parameter contains information about the request. For example, in rec.data, you can inspect all the data which comes from the request, basically the shape or the content of this safety incident to be created. And then you can plug in your custom logic and do whatever you want.
All right.
So
Awesome.
in this case, for example, this if statement in line number 6 basically says, if the category code is security, then you want to change the priority code to high.
Right. Exactly. So if anybody is trying to create an incident on the incident CF application that I just put in, if you put security before it actually does the post to the database, I change it just to show what could be done here with a little bit of code. In a future session, we're going to change that to a business rule using workflow and business rules. But for today, that's just to show where that custom code is. Now, David, what about this request that on, the service after service on? What's that about?
Yeah. So with requests, it's a little bit difficult because it can happen that it's not only a single request, but a batch request. And that's basically, let's say, a set of requests coming through at the same time, and they either succeed together or they fail together.
Gotcha.
That happens, for example, sometimes if you want to bind a few requests into one transaction. And so we need a way to have a hook when this whole request is succeeded. Now in Node.js, we made this request object an event emitter, so you can actually register handlers on this object. Okay, now my light goes off again. Just a second.
That's all good.
Move a little bit.
No problem. But we can see that we've got a couple of little console statements. So people will see this shortly, that when we run this application again, when we do the event emit, we'll just basically see it being pushed out, right?
Yeah, so that's true. But we only want to emit an event if the whole request succeeded.
Right.
So what we do, we register this succeeded handler, and we say when this request is succeeded, we want to run this logic, line number 12 and 13. So in this case, we log that we successfully created an event, and then we just write service.emit, given a topic. In this case, it's safety incident / created, and provide the payload. And that's all you need to do to emit an event. Super, super simple.
I know. So to me, like, it's like, I was joking with some people, like it's literally like 3 to 4 lines of code to get an event being published to that enterprise message service when you've got all the other services created in the background. In other words, you have enterprise messaging running, or if you use a flat file system like that, it's not complicated to publish an event, right? To make it event driven. Which I love.
Exactly, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so we have this file copied in. So I think what I need to do now, if I go back to here, and if I shut this down and just terminate it, and if I run it again, we should be able to see quickly that if we submit the same request, so we have this event successfully created, and here's the ID and the category of that message, and it says mocking messaging using file. And so I won't go over there because we're running a little bit short on time, but basically what's happening is this message, this event has been emitted, and it's using the file system to store these events that we're creating. So then the question is, let's say this is the full-blown app and this is all we needed to do, which is try to keep it simple for today. But now we want to transition over to the enterprise messaging and how that would work. So that's the next thing to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So once your application logic is working, right, you can test it locally and inspect the file and see that there's an event in. Then you know it works and you can make the switch, and that's it. Yeah.
Awesome.
You don't have to touch your application coding to switch to enterprise messaging.
Right, and that's the beauty, I think, of this, right? So I'm just going back to here. So for people that are watching, I'm going to uncomment, basically, the enterprise messaging. So make it enterprise messaging, and I have a kind statement here, but then I'm going to put the underscore in, so it'll no longer use file-based messaging. It will use the enterprise messaging. So then the next question then is for folks that didn't join next time, I want to get it now. I want to take this application and I want to deploy it to Cloud Foundry. And this is also a bit of a learning curve, but I'm going to simplify that for everybody on the phone today. So one of the things that we need to do is a build of the project so that we get it, all the files that are generated, as an example, for HANA, we need to get that over. So one of the things we need to do, first of all, is we need to do this command, which we talked about earlier. So env node underscore env equals production. And then when we do that, and now we do an npm run build, you'll see there's no gen folder here at the moment. So in this folder, there's no gen folder. So we're going to run this build. And what should happen, it's going to create this gen folder. And you can see there's a gen DB folder and a gen server folder, which is great. Now, I want to tell everybody there's 3 pieces to this puzzle. One piece that I've done in advance, which is creating a HANA container inside of Cloud Foundry. So if I just pop over here for 1 second and I go back to here, and I go into services and service instances, you will see I've got a HANA trial David DB container, and I've got one here called Garage DB, which is what we're going to use now. So if I go back again, whoops, back to my code line here. So that's already been done. So step one has been done. The container for HANA has been done, no problem. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to change over to that Gen DB folder. And if I do a CF push from here, it's basically going to take the contents of that generated folder and push it over. Now, I already know that I made a small little boo-boo here because I left it as 128, but that's okay. We'll let it run, which is what happened this morning. I guess I didn't change the name. We can fix that on the Cloud Foundry side. So that parameter, which is in this MTA YAML file, it basically tells the app on the Cloud Foundry side how much memory you should have. So we can easily flip that switch in that generated folder, or I can do it on Cloud Foundry. So what we should see now, if I pop back there, I should see an application that's in the middle of starting this DB app. And so I just click it. We'll see it's, maybe I probably have to change the quota right away, probably. It's 256. And then we'll just restart it. Hoping that's all we had to do. What's going on here? Let's restart. Right away, it's crashing on me. I don't know why. Let's go back. Let me just go in here. Or maybe it was installing package.json. No, it's still running. I don't know. Maybe I didn't give it time to finish. Let's just see. Or I might have to stop it and fix that file. Hold on, DB, source, manifest YAML. So I think I should have had this, right? I should have had this as 256, I think. And then was it here we had the garage listed, or was it in the serve one? In the server folder?
You need, no, that was on the server, not in the database.
It's on the server side? Okay, so this is fine, just so we have it, 256.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I don't know, we might have to just wait 30 seconds to see what happens here, but this says down, so I'm going to just delete that guy. I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm going to try it again. I don't know what happened there. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think we didn't wait long enough.
Let's see, CF push. Gen folder, we got this made 28, let's see. This is staging failed. I don't know, I haven't seen that before, that staging failed error. Let's see. Sorry, folks, I don't know what happened there. We could say we are doing, I made the comment this morning on my Twitter account, this is live without a net, so you never know what could potentially happen. Let's see what happens this time. Let that run in the background, and hopefully this guy will have better success.
So now it's installing the node modules on the server.
And so basically, as I understand it, what's happening now in behind the scenes is it's taking these structures and it's trying to install them in that HANA trial instance. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's correct. And before that, it reads that package JSON in that folder, in that DB folder, and scans for those dependencies. In this case, it's one dependency, I think, and installs it. And that's the current step. Okay,
so while that's doing that, let's pop over. Let me just make sure I check my instructions here that I created, make sure I didn't miss anything that would have caused that error. No, I don't see anything. Well, let's check the serve folder while we're waiting. So there's a manifest file here. And looks like, yeah, I'm going to have to change this one, right? So what we're doing now is we're just adding in a reference to the service that the server needs. So on Cloud Foundry, if you've got a enterprise messaging service and you've got a server that was generated by CAP, And if that CAP application needs access to the enterprise messaging service, you need to bind it. So you can do it via the cockpit. I can go in and I can bind it, or I can make a reference here to it. So when it gets deployed, it'll do it automatically. So if I go back now, looks like that says running. So we'll go to gen server and we'll do the same thing.
Beware to increase the memory a bit, because 128 is a little bit low for this application.
You're 100% right, as always.
Because people post pictures all the time.
Yep, that's true. Okay, so I got a CF push here. And one of the things that I've been using is this random route, but I think because we're pushing the same application, it should be okay, right? I think. But I'll just put it.
We can try.
Random. You put 2 dashes like this, and then what happens is if the URL happens to be already over there, it'll generate a new one for you. So now that's going to push the serve part of it. So if we pop over here and we pop into applications, we do a quick refresh on my screen. We got about 13 minutes. We're right on target with timing wise, which is good. So we see this garage serve now being published. And when you pick one of these applications, I'll just pick one of the ones we already did just to show people while that's deploying. When you pick an application, there's the reference to this service binding that I was referring to earlier. So when I pick that, we can see there should be 2 bindings, 3 actually. So you got 3 bindings here, but one is to enterprise messaging, which we absolutely do need. And obviously there's a mistake. I got this bound twice, but you need to have that. Otherwise, you won't get very far. Okay,
exactly, because our framework needs to know the credentials of this enterprise messaging instance, and with binding our app to it, we have access to it.
Right. Okay, perfect. So let's try a couple of things here now. So that's been deployed. So now if I go back to Garage Serve, now just to introduce people to this concept of environment variables, can you tell them what that is while I'm taking a copy of this?
Exactly, but be careful because it's very sensitive information.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I can't, they won't see my screen, I don't think, too fast because I'm moving it around like this, making them crazy. So let's just copy it and then get out of there quickly. Okay.
Yeah, so
what is that for?
whenever you bind an application to a service, then your application gets enriched with an additional set of environmental variables, which have all the credentials needed to access this service. In this case, it's enterprise messaging, and if we bind our app to it, then we have all the stuff we need to make that connection.
Right. So what I'm doing now is basically I'm enabling my local application to use those environment variables, because this wouldn't be necessary in the cloud. It's just because I'm doing it locally, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Exactly. So what happens locally is we scan this file called default.env.json and mimic basically what would have happened if you would have bound your app to that service. And now we have access to all those environmental variables which we need and all those credentials, and we can even run our app locally using enterprise messaging.
Right. So what I'm trying to do now, just to show people, is I've got this window, and we're right on time here. So I've got this window that is a very small, not complicated, Node.js application that's now connected to enterprise messaging in the cloud, to the service that we just posted. The second thing I'd like to do is just show people when you use Cloud Foundry, you can do this command logs like this. And when you use the syntax CF logs, David, it's basically doing a real-time poll of that log attached to that particular service. So anything that happens that you would log to the console, as an example, would come through in that window, and we should be able to see it. So just to recap, on my local laptop, I've got a Node.js application running that's listening for events in the cloud. So if anybody posts anything to that service now, what should happen, they try to create an event. They create an event. The event gets stored inside of HANA through CAP. And then CAP says, hey, I'm going to emit an event to the enterprise message service. It gets put onto the enterprise message service. And then from there, this Node.js application is now listening to a queue. So in fact, you know what I might do? Just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to stop this and I'm going to bring up the messaging console. So we can see here that, we can see that that's expired again. So hold on, security first. We can see here that safety incidents 2 has no incidents in it. The bucket is basically empty for this queue. So now if I go back and if I've been following my own instructions well, you can see now that I've got a post to an application that's sitting in the cloud that's going to dump it into the messaging service. So if I just hit send here, what should happen, I got a 201 that's been created. And if I refresh this, now I've got one message in the queue. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, what's going on? Well, I stopped this app. So now if I run it, what should happen, it should immediately go out, go to that queue, connect, and then bring down whatever message was in there. So if we get, so boom, there it is. So there's a hardware message. And at the same token, if I bring up this guy, so now I've also got messages coming in, incoming messages into the console. So now if I go back to here and I just kind of give people an idea how fast this actually happens. So if I do a couple of requests here, you can see it goes super fast. So and this is going round trip, everybody in the phone. So it's going from my laptop to the cloud, to the message bus, and then back to my laptop where I have one consumer of that, basically. Does that make sense, David?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this is going really well. So I think we're just about done here. We're actually going to finish a couple of minutes early, I think, for the first time ever. So let me just go back to my console. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Stop sharing my desktop. Go over here. So I just want to go over a few questions that I saw, David, in the Q&A here, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
How do I get that to be bigger? Okay, cool. Can we have multiple subscribers? So this is a question from Rakesh. Rakesh, can we have multiple subscribers for one published message?
Sure. So usually you publish messages to a certain topic, and then the consumer just has to subscribe to this topic. So he will create his own queue, subscribe to this topic. Another consumer will create its own queue and subscribe to this topic. And then you can have as many consumers as you want.
All right, got it. Okay, so that hopefully that answers your question, Rakesh. If not, you can put it back, follow up with another question. Kindly position the difference between leveraging SAP's enterprise messaging versus SAP's cloud platform integration service. Does CPI also ferry messages from A to B, transforming them along the way? And this, I think, the last part of your question there, and I'll just take this one because I'm pretty familiar with the integration service that we have. Number one, there is a messaging client for cloud platform integration. In other words, let's say there were messages being published like we are now. So we're throwing messages onto the enterprise messaging service. And you wanted to use CPI to pull messages off and then do some processing and then perhaps put them back on, you could certainly do that. But CPI itself is not an enterprise messaging bus. So this is really important to know the difference there. And so you would use CPI to potentially do some of the transformations of a message, things like that. That's the whole idea behind that one. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Let's see. What is the Postman like VS Code plugin you are using, Dave? Do you remember that plugin name?
Sure. It's called REST Client. Let me post it. REST Client.
Okay, REST Client. He'll put that in there for you. is enterprise messaging SAP's answer to Kafka? Now, I'm sorry, I don't play with Kafka a lot, but I know that some people, even within SAP, I've heard of Kafka being used in the data ingestion space. I'm not saying that's the recommendation, but for me, I know that we've used it to push a lot of data using Kafka, which might be one difference maybe there. Yes, there are. We can definitely get you the Douglas. We can definitely get you the slides. Not a problem. Can you send complex data through the messaging service? Now, I have an opinion on this, David. I'd love to get yours though first because you're the guy behind it. But what about complex data? What do you think of that?
Sure, you can paste any JSON object you want. It could be as nested as you like. In the end, it will be converted into a binary format, sent over the line, and that's it. And the receiver will get the binary, can make a JSON out of it again, and have this JSON. So absolutely no problem. Awesome.
And I would say that the model or the architecture that I envision for this particular application is I want to use enterprise messaging as like a wake-up call. So people will see in the future ones that we do. So in this particular case, when an event is created, the only thing that I post as a message is really the ID is what I need to uniquely retrieve it. So when we get into maybe the UI5 application that we're going to build a little bit later, when I want to wake it up, it'll receive the ID, and then the application itself would then go back and use a REST call to pick up the details and then bring it back. That'd be the idea, as opposed to sending the entire message, because you might not want to react to the message, number one, and then from a security perspective, maybe you don't want to put all your data in there. So that would be something. Yeah, so I don't like Shabaji came on top. What's the recommendation on scalability? Like, I can't give you exact numbers, but I know myself, I've tried it from my laptop doing thousands of messages, and it's so fast to go across the wire and back. It's just amazing. But I guess that would obviously be affected by the size of the message. So I don't know what the recommendation there would be. But I think in general, when you start poking around on the internet, you'll see that smaller messages is the way to go, and then use those as a trigger to do something. Can we already hook in enterprise messaging to S4? Well, coincidentally enough, if you go back, Robin, to the previous, so David just did this in an internal session for SAP, which I think, was it a DevCom you did that?
It was a DCOM, yeah, exactly. DCOM. So what I did was I set up an S4HANA system to emit messages to an enterprise messaging instance. You can do this. And the SAP Extension Factory helps you quite a lot with that task. You can automate some things. And then you can just create a listener to those events, and that's it. It's quite easy. By the way, there's also an upcoming Open SAP course about the building application using the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model. And in week 4, I will also consume messages from an S4HANA system, and I will show you how this is done then.
Very cool, very cool. I'm just trying to get back to the presentation, and I'm having a problem because I'm not too familiar with the tooling. How do I get back here? Getting started. Oh, here it is. So live view, push this out. So we just want to show people just one thing. I want to show them the set of next sessions coming up. So we've got reporting coming up. So we're going to show people how to use Fiori Elements to report on this application. And then, as people know, we don't actively get in touch with people after the session other than to say thanks for attending. So if you find yourself in a situation where you've watched this webinar and you do want to get in touch with myself and or David and discuss how that could be applicable in your environment, by all means, just answer yes here and we will get back to you. Not a problem. And I think just to finish off on your point, David, about the S4, we also did a garage session with Karsten Strothman back in November timeframe, and we showed exactly that, hooking into S4. And in fact, some of those events are now published on the API Hub. So last but not least, David, thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing to work with, super educated on the topic. Have kept me on the straight and narrow, so I want to thank you for taking the time today to attend. And of course, thanks for everybody that joined in. We hope you enjoyed the session. And if you have any further questions, of course, reach out to me. If you have ideas for future sessions that you'd like to see handled, by all means, let us know, and we will try to accommodate. Okay, everybody, we're going to call it a day. Right at the top of the hour, right on time. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.